Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Wytpod. My name is Harshit, and I'm the Director of Business Alliances at Wytlabs. We're a digital agency specializing in SaaS and e-commerce SEO. I've got Will with me today, is the head of marketing at Seller Labs. Now, they are a cloud-based tools for e-commerce business to source, sell, and provide customer service. A big welcome to you, Will. I'm so happy to have you with me today.
Thanks. Yeah, good to be here.
Brent, now could you please provide an overview of Seller Labs products and services, and what are the unique value propositions for it?
The interesting thing about Seller Labs is we were one of the first to the scene in terms of e-commerce automation. So about 10 years ago, before God created the earth in Amazon terms, because that was long before any of that was the Wild West, back when things were you threw it up and things just flew off the shelf.
Yeah.
Back at that time period, Brandon Checketts was an Amazon seller, and he was trying to figure out how to get better reviews because he
Mm.
knew that if he got better reviews, he could increase the speed at which things would roll. And he built an automation tool that literally just automated feedback. So you would like request seller feedback and that sort of thing. And it was pretty powerful to the point where they were having hundreds of people, hundreds of new sellers sign up for it every single week because there wasn't anybody else out there doing that. That was the first
Yeah.
time anybody had seen anything automated in what was there. And in coming months, Brandon would actually reach out to the Seller Labs API team and tell them, hey, this is a little bit insecure. We probably want to look at something like maybe an MWS auth token.
Mm.
And so he gave them the idea around that. 2 months later, they made the MWS auth token. So we've been around the Amazon API for as long as it's existed in all of its different iterations. And that has been quite the journey. So that's our expertise. We focus on Amazon, we focus on their API, and we build tools for sellers. And now we're actually focused on agencies building out tools that automate processes for them. Everything from lead generation all the way down to custom reporting to automated audits, you name it, we're in the game and we're doing some pretty cool stuff that I'm not seeing anybody else in this space do with Amazon data.
Oh, that's amazing. And I think, because you were the first mover, so that again gives you a real good competitive edge altogether. So, brilliant, man. I would love to know, can you share any specific examples of some of the most innovative and creative marketing campaigns that Seller Lab has executed? And what impact did it bring to your user engagement and brand visibility?
Great question. So, from a standpoint of marketing campaigns, I honestly think at the very beginning, it was all about product led growth, right? The way that Seller Labs for Feedback Genius specifically grew was through its own software. The funny thing about Amazon sellers is they often buy from Amazon as well. And so as the tool grew and an Amazon seller bought something and 2 days later they received an email requesting feedback or hey, let us know how everything went and please feel free to leave us a review. It would mean a lot, that kind of thing. They were like, whoa, wait a minute, where they'd go dig in and find out where the messaging came from. So much like Hotmail or many of those others, the way that it grew was through that virality of people recognizing and finding those different pieces of software. And
Mm.
that's been a focus of ours is trying to create that. The other feat of marketing genius that I would say is when Jeff Cohen was running marketing here at Seller Labs, he focused a lot on staying super relevant and ahead of the trend.
Okay.
So he and his team, when T's and C's changed or anything on Amazon that was shifting or moving, he was at that forefront talking about it on Facebook Lives, talking about it in front of people at conferences and all of those sorts of different things. Just remaining uber relevant in terms of the conversations that were happening
Mm.
out there in the space. So those would
Okay.
be the two I think executed campaigns from a Seller Labs perspective in the past that have been done and had good results.
Brilliant, man. And how does your company approach as a part of its marketing strategy, and what role does it play for enhancing the visibility of companies, tools, or even services? It's a pretty competitive landscape altogether.
Yeah, no, it's wickedly competitive. I would say that our approach to SEO was was and is all about content creation and content creation of high quality. finding things that are highly relevant to talk about and updating those blog posts, keeping things fresh and relevant for what's being discussed in the marketplace, because content is king. It's not about stuffing keywords anymore. It's not about weird
Yeah.
backlinks or any of that black hat stuff. That it's really about engaging, you know, unique value generating content.
Yeah, makes sense. And even I've seen interactive content is gaining a lot of popularity. Have you experimented with interactive content in your marketing initiatives? And if so, what kind of engagement or results have you observed? Yeah.
Great question. I would say at this current point in time, we're in the mode of exploring more of the interactive content that's available. I think the fascinating thing about interactive content is that it really is a choose your own adventure. One of the players that I enjoy connecting with or have connected with, tested a little bit around that, is the Typeform Video Ask tool, which really is, it's a form, but it's actually all built in videos. Whether it's a lead funnel or just an application to sign up for something, it's
Uh-huh.
basically giving you the opportunity to have your client experience an interactive face-to-face journey with someone with a bunch of micro video clips in a choose your adventure style. And there are other softwares that have come out that are doing that as well. And I do see it as an ever increasing trend, and especially with AI
Yep.
becoming on the forefront, there's no longer a need to have an if then statement that clearly defines this is exactly the response. You now have the ability to interpret someone's language or meaning, and the computer can respond in kind and give relevant and valuable information.
Yeah. Talking of AI, have your company introduced AI in any of your offering tools or even like in general for your
Yeah.
own marketing? Do you leverage AI?
Yeah, the first place that we went, because basically what we've done is we've made tools that can go in and grab all of the data inside the SP API, inside the advertising API, and in a couple of the unique places where Amazon doesn't give you an API, there's bots that go out and grab some of that stuff. So we
Mhm.
have those three different data sources, and making sense of that data is a whole nother layer. And so we have a Google Sheets extension that we've built that allows you to pipe all of your data from Amazon and just push it right into a Google spreadsheet in whatever format you want.
Uh-huh.
And inside that application in beta right now, we have a chat with your data function. So you
Mhm.
can go in and say, what was my top seller yesterday? And it will look at the schema of the database and say, this is the SQL query you should be using to handle that. And then you can pipe that right into your spreadsheet, and you've got the table that describes how that was going yesterday. And we're currently in talks with a couple of other providers that specialize in kind of this dialogue-esque format to chat with your data, to chat with your Amazon account, and
Mhm.
get out some of those insights so that we can knock that down and get things rolling.
Yeah, that's awesome. But I've seen another thing like that works really in the SaaS niche is building a community around your brand. That is something which is crucial, right? How do you foster a sense of community among your set of users? And like what benefits have emerged from having an actively engaged user community?
So the interesting thing about community is that's actually a big part of our focus for 2024. We're building an e-commerce service providers community. So this will be a place where sellers are actually not welcome. So if all you're doing is selling on Amazon or selling on Shopify, we're not inviting you to this community. This is a community where you've got to be providing a service of some kind to
Mhm.
e-commerce sellers. And so the idea is that this is a group of people who are providing valuable services to the different individuals out there that are selling on
Mhm.
e-commerce in Amazon or Shopify or Walmart. And that community, it's interesting because as I've described this concept to several agency owners and the like, they've said, yeah, no, you're right. I'm not aware of a community that's specific to just agency owners. There's lots of communities out there that are e-commerce. There's a rocket fuel one, and there's lots of different like $1 million sellers and different communities that foster both agencies or service providers and sellers, but there's no one
Mhm.
who's just focused on the e-commerce service provider. So that's
Okay.
watch for that closely over the depending on when this episode
So
airs,
we
it may
we do
actually already
qualify
be
for
out.
that, right? So we qualify for that,
Yes,
right?
you absolutely qualify for that. And later we're gonna have you come jump on our podcast because we have a podcast as well. And the podcast is one of the ways that we find new people to join the community. It's called Monetizing Your Mental Capital. And so we're
Mm.
teaching Amazon sellers how to create a totally new revenue stream because right now they're really good at monetizing physical products. But when you get to monetizing an idea or monetizing a service, that's a foreign concept. And they always think the grass is greener on that side of the fence. And
Mm.
so we explore on our podcast the difficulties, the challenges that you'll face in trying to build a service business and all of those sorts of things. And we've had lots of cool Chad Rubin, Jason Boyce, and several other cool people jump on the podcast. So excited to have you guys join and share some of the nuggets of insight of how to monetize mental capital as well.
Oh, that's amazing. I would love to. And I would love to know, like, with respect to like multiple marketing channels available, how do you, I'm sure like you must be leveraging also tons of them. How do you basically create a cohesive cross-channel strategy to ensure a consistent brand message or and even user experience in that sense? How do you do that?
I would say the biggest key to that castle is a branding guide, something that's very well defined in terms of when you see the Seller Labs logo, it's going to look like this and it's going to have this font and this size, and this is how we arrange things and put that there. I'm amazed at how often that's something that I've been in the startup that didn't have one of those. I've been in the shoes of not putting that out there in the right way. And I think in the beginning, it's ragtag enough that it's not the most important thing to put out there. But as
Mhm.
you grow and as you have that experience happening in multiple places, you have to create standard operating procedures across the company where everyone's following the same format so that people recognize, oh, that's your mark, that's your brand name.
Mhm. Makes sense. And because you're talking about branding, I would love to know what are the KPIs, like beyond the traditional metrics, what are the main KPIs that your marketing team like measures the overall impact of Cellular Labs brand in industry? And are there any specific tools that you're leveraging for that purpose? Anything around web monitoring, social monitoring, all of those things?
Gotcha. Yeah, I would say that at this current moment in time, because Seller Labs is going through a transformative process, we've actually dug down to our roots and started to focus more on that agency product. And
Gotcha.
so we've been less focused on the branding play from overarching how are we being seen out there beyond making sure that we're at the trade shows that are most important to us and those sorts of things. So I would say that my advice would be more around how to get in touch with a new audience that you're trying to track down, because that's about 6 months ago we decided that we were going to focus. We like sellers, we think they're great people. We have a lot of sellers who are customers, but we decided to focus our efforts on generating data tools for agencies, and that's been a wickedly awesome challenge. We'll put it that way to
Okay.
identify, connect, and convert those individuals into understanding and using our data tools.
So what channels are you leveraging for it to gain traction for this new vision now, for this new goal altogether?
So the interesting thing was at the beginning, I started reaching out to e-commerce service providers and I was like, we can totally take all of the frustration of everything manual off your plate when it comes to reporting. We can just make that just an easy, slick process. And we got a few people who were like, oh, yeah, that's the pain we're trying to solve right now. But we discovered that the pain wasn't painful enough for them to be like, oh, yeah, I'm totally in. Let's do this.
Mhm.
And I was having a difficult time getting people to talk to me. And so I actually sat down and looked at my roots, looked at several different strategies that I've had in the past to create some of that traction and relationships. And we do something very similar to you guys with this podcast. So our podcast is a service to the e-commerce sellers in that we're teaching them about monetizing mental capital,
Yeah.
but we really saw it as a vehicle to get to know more of these agency owners so that we could understand more about who they are.
Mhm.
And the rapport and the partnerships that we create through that relationship has been amazing. I can see that's what you guys are doing too with your podcast in building relationships right and left to connect that dot. And the cool part is it not only generates the relationship, but you also get a lot of really cool content and you get to meet a lot of people.
Yeah.
So it's a really powerful tool. And then that funnels into the community and all of the other things we're doing with that.
Yeah, makes sense. And are you leveraging even user-generated content? Is it something part of your marketing strategy? Not, what's your take on that?
User generated content is interesting. I think that for us, the user generated content we're getting is very similar to the user generated content you're creating in a podcast like this one, right? So this can be redistributed, handed out to hundreds, if not thousands of people in very different ways, right? Every time you ask me a question and I answer, that becomes an opportunity for you to repurpose that content. The podcasts that we've done thus far, we've had amazing discussions around what it takes to monetize venture capital and how to avoid some of the common pitfalls of starting a service-based agency or creating a productized service. And so that content is highly relevant both to the e-commerce sellers market, but also to other agency owners. And so that becomes the user-generated content that we're putting out there in front of lots of different people. And we're currently in the process of building the engine that makes it so that we can repurpose that and go across
Yeah.
all the different channels.
Makes sense. And are you, because you're focusing a lot onto the podcast, and that is one of the good channels that you're working on mainly, I would love to know, are there any specific strategies that are working really well when it comes to promoting the podcast and gaining more visibility on that front?
I would say that the most effective thing we've found is to make it clear as to the purpose of the podcast. So the more vague the podcast is, the harder it is to achieve guests, to get viewership, the whole thing. It can be very vague. And so the more dialed in you can make that and clear, the better you can go. And then leveraging past guests, right? So I have a lot of relationships in the e-commerce space, and that's one thing we did as well. We reached out to the people that we knew that other people would know, and then we can now use those names to reach out to people that we don't know and say, hey, we had Chad Rubin on the podcast and we've had Jason Boyce on the podcast and we'd love to have you as well. And they know those names, but they don't know us as well. And so you could leverage that momentum of reputation to push things through and grow.
Makes sense. And any specific challenges that you're facing to scale your podcast or this activity in general, or with respect to your production, anything that resonates or facilitates your workflow?
Yeah, I think that one of our challenges, we have all of this amazing data. We went down the pathway of identifying exactly what it looked like to create totally clear look at financial data. When
Mhm.
most people come in and they look at the Amazon API and they want to look at orders, they go to the orders API. That makes sense. You would go to the orders API for orders. We decided to go at it from a different approach, and we decided if we can figure out how to make what shows up in your bank account
Yep.
balance almost like on a financial accounting level, can we figure out how to do accounting level data used for marketing and performance purposes? And so we base all of our data, we have access to all of those other APIs. People compare all the time. But where we focus our efforts is on that transaction data so that we can actually match it up to what's in your bank account. And in doing so, we started to add cost of goods sold. We're in the process, the next 2 or 3 weeks, we'll have a prototype done for taking inbound shipment fees, for example, and taking their cubic volume and cubic weight and distributing that, the dimensional weight, distributing that across the SKUs. So each specific SKU now has a true SKU economics where you can say, here's the profit and loss. Look at that. So we were like, all excited about this groundbreaking stuff, like $2 million per month or $2 million per settlement account. So you can imagine hundreds of thousands of transactions. We were getting it to the point where it was reconciling to the penny, which is pretty incredible considering that Amazon API and all of the stuff that we got transactions in there that don't have like date stamps.
Mm.
You have to be like, okay, that doesn't have a date stamp, but it does have a product ID. So if I and massage all of that together, the challenge we faced was, so what? Like I would tell people about this, and they're like, so what? What does that do for me? And that feature benefit jump in our marketing has been a real challenge from the standpoint of we know this is groundbreaking. We know this is exciting. We know that we're not seeing this happen in a lot of other places. How do we get people to care? I'd walk up and I'd tell people, yeah, we're a data as a product company. We do this and that and this and that. And they're like, oh, that's nice. And then off they go to the next place. And so it's taken a lot of effort to understand more what is the real pain that we speak to
Oh,
beyond just we do custom reporting to help people really understand why the data is important. So that value exchange has been difficult.
makes sense. Okay, now I would love to know because you put down some very good points. I would love to understand how exactly is the churn rate in your organization, and what programs do you have running, like marketing programs running in parallel to increase your customer retention as well as your customer engagement?
The churn rate is pretty industry standard for a SaaS company. That was one of the first things that I analyzed when I joined the company was trying to understand what that churn rate looked like and where those go. So we're right in that SaaS industry standard churn rate. And as we dug into that a little more, one of the things that we learned and realized was it's probably better not to focus on this. If we are industry standard or beating industry standard, this probably isn't the place where we need to spend all of our time. We came up with a whole bunch of reasons why people churn.
Mhm.
Sometimes they just stop selling, sometimes they whatever. And a lot of times it's not something you can do. There's nothing you can do about it. And we also found that there were other competitors who wanted to niche down or focus on different things that we didn't want to niche down and focus on. And focusing on churn too much made us stop focusing on what we were good at. And we were just running around trying to chase people who were already on their way out the door. And so my experience with churn up to this point has been as long as you're within industry standard, go get Stripe and several of these other programs that have that rescue idea of the credit card expires and they have a tool that helps you re-grab that and look at some of those common basic churn reasons. Get some programs in place like that, but don't hyper focus on it. Hyper
Yeah.
focus on making your product better and making it so that people can't ignore you because of your product, not because how good you are at messaging them when it's time to churn.
Hmm. If I talk about like the niche down industry standard for you, what's that percentage?
The niche down,
Industry, like the niche down, like within your specific segment, what's the industry standard of churn rate?
man, that is a good question. It's been a hot minute. Like I said, we focused on this like back when I very first came to the company. And you look at Paddle, which is obviously a pretty knowledgeable company from that standpoint, and they talk about annual churn rate being between 5 and 7%.
Oh,
And so that's where it should be. And when we realized that we were lining up with that, we realized this is not the place we should be focusing our effort.
okay, we're coming to an end, and I would love to have a quick rapid fire with you. Are you ready for that?
I'm ready.
Okay, if given a superpower, what will you choose? Okay, would you rather be able to speak every language in the world or be able to talk to animals?
If I had to choose between those two, talk to animals.
Okay, do you have any pets?
I have 3 cats.
Oh, awesome, man. I'm more of a dog person. All right, if you could travel back in time, what period would you go to?
I would probably go to either like the Industrial Revolution, the time where machines and invention was happening a lot in the motor car was invented, some of those different things, or
So
I
we are in Industrial Revolution 4. That's like IR4. Which one?
agreed, which is cool because we get to live in the middle of that. But there's some simplicity that's missing in our industrial revolution because it's so complex and there's so much happening, especially with AI. Or I would go back to the time of Christ, back to Israel and
Yeah,
walk where he walked and go check that out. That's the other time period I would go to.
very interesting. Okay, so you are a religious person, I believe.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Very religious.
All right. What's the fastest speed you have ever driven in a car?
Oh man. That is, I kind of want to watch the end of these episodes now just to see what's there. We buried the needle, so I actually don't know how fast we were going. We were
Okay.
headed downhill. It was the middle of the night. It was just me and a buddy in our car, and I think it said like 110 or something like that on there, but we buried the needles. I don't actually know exactly how fast. That we slowed down by the time the cop pulled us over, but it was pretty fast.
All right. How many hours of sleep do you need?
I need at least 7. If I get less than 7, I've got to catch up on the weekends. If I get more than 7, a lot of times I'm groggy. So I need 7.
Okay. What's your hidden talent?
My hidden talent is selling hope. I
Okay.
am really good at getting people excited about going in a certain direction. So, Six Working Geniuses, Patrick Lencioni, galvanizing is what he calls that working genius. Or in the Strength Finder book, they call it woo, where you're
Mhm.
really good at convincing people to jump in on a new idea or go to a new place. So
Yeah.
that's my
I
hidden talent.
I think it's critical, even a guy in your role, you need to keep the team motivated and everything. Yeah.
Yep.
That's a crucial skill. All right. Now, coming to my very last question. What's your last Google search?
Oh boy. My last Google search. My last Google search is actually SaaS churn. When you asked me for the churn rate, I was quickly like, I'm pretty sure it's 5 to 7%, but I'm gonna double check myself just to make sure. That was my last Google search, was literally while I was on this phone call with you.
All right. Thank you so much, Will. Thank you for sharing your experience about the company, your strategies, and everything. I really appreciate your time here with me. Thank you so much.